But Hamza, are you not the head of your family right now? There is an increasing amount of people that choose not to have children anymore. Most of these people tend to be like the extreme liberal types who do it for the environment, because overpopulation is bad and therefore we are not going to contribute to this. And I cannot bring up any sympathy for this argument because I feel like this is just a form of lineaginal cuckoldry, as I like to call it, because let's be honest, the problem is not the fact that here in the West we have 1 or 2 children. The problem lies in other countries where people don't give a fuck and they have 10 children. And so if you are going to sort of cuckold yourself out of a natural lifestyle and your own happiness because you want a virtue signal that you are solving a problem that really you were not contributing to that much in the first place, I find it hard to bring up sympathy for that argument. But right now, there also seem to be a lot of people that look at things from a more traditional perspective, and they choose to not have children at all, or at least in Western countries, because they feel like Western society is degenerating, and therefore they do not want to raise their children in a society that has values that they no longer agree with. I saw this video from HAMZA, where he talks about this concept. And he brings up the main arguments that he'd not like to have children in a Western country, in the UK, where he lives right now, because he feels like this country is no longer in line with his values, essentially. He talks about how most relationships have become depolarized. Men are not masculine anymore, women are not feminine anymore, and how men aren't the heads of the family anymore. Now, a lot of not so traditional people are going to freak out and say, oh, this is politically incorrect. But that's the way he wants to live his life. I can fully feel where he's coming from. And he feels like our modern societies no longer really have men as the head of their families anymore, and he doesn't want to live like that, so he prefers not to have children in a country that lives like that, okay? This is what I think of it, and this is why I agree but simultaneously disagree with it. I can feel where he's coming from, yes. I absolutely agree that relationships are becoming depolarized. Men are less masculine, women are less feminine. Me and my partner have a relationship where I am quite masculine, she is quite feminine, and it actually leads to well, I wouldn't say issues, but like friction between us and the world and the country we live in, because most people don't live like that. She has female friends. We have family members even. That sort of judges for the way that we live our lives, despite the fact that we are genuinely convinced that this is the more natural, more healthy, more happy way to actually live a family, right? Where the woman is more feminine, the man is more masculine. We are convinced that this is a better dynamic, that makes you happier, it makes your relationship better, it functions better, etc. And so I can feel where Hamza's coming from. It can be tough to live in a place like this. But at the same time, this is the part where I sort of disagree with the harsh statement of not wanting to have children. I do want to have children. In fact, I already have one child, so it's too late for me to claim that I don't want to have children in this Western world. Because, this is why. I think that life is largely about finding a way regardless of circumstances. You see, the thing is, there is always something, right? Yes, the countries we live in right now aren't perfect. But what realistically is the alternative? What other country are we supposed to move towards before we have children? Because first of all, a lot of other countries are starting to become westernized in an increasing pace. But what other countries would be a better alternative? Are we going to move to Africa? Are we going to move to Asia? Are we going to live in China? Thailand? Are we going to live in The Middle East? Are we going to live in Eastern Europe? Romania, perfect example. So many people are hyped on Romania right now because Andrew Tate lives in Romania, and Andrew Tate says, oh, the West is bad, Romania is great. I can guarantee you that Romania isn't exactly great either. No offense, Romania, but people who are living in Romania right now, they have a big list of things of why Romania isn't that great and why they would have rather lived in a Western country. Might be slightly different things than the list of things that we have right here in West, but people in Romania have their own list of things, right? They would have rather lived in the UK than Romania. And then the people in the UK say, oh, but I want to live in Romania because of Andrew Tate. The problem never goes away. There is always a new problem. If I would have been born 2,000 years ago here in the Netherlands, in the northern part of the Netherlands, my Frisian Germanic ancestors would have been conquered by the Roman legions, and my sons would have been sent off to war to fight in a war that they don't care about against the Greeks or something, and they would die, and then my daughters would have been shipped off to Rome and become like a harem girl from some rich Roman. And I would feel horrible about it, and I would say, oh, I wish I lived in Rome. But then if I would have lived in Rome itself, I would have been this extremely poor worker class laborer living in the slums of Rome, eating an incredibly shitty diet and being incredibly unhappy and unhealthy. And I would have said, oh, if only I lived free in the north, like the Germanic people in the woods, and eat deer and eat healthy food and then raise my happy children. There's always something, right? My grandfather literally got put in a forced labor camp by the Nazis to build U-boats. There is always something, there will always be something. Yes, the West might not be ideal. Yes, the values might not be exactly in line with how we would ideally want to raise our children, but what place in the world, what place throughout history had the exact right circumstances and values to live the perfect life? It doesn't exist, does it? And do we actually need the perfect circumstances? Because try to think about it like this. HAMZA says, I would not like to raise my children in a country where the man is not the head of the family, okay? But HAMZA, are you not the head of your family right now? You and your partner are a family, aren't you? You might not have children yet, you might not have signed a piece of paper for the government, but you are a family. Who's the head of that family? If you choose to be the head of that family, you are the head of that family, aren't you? Despite the fact that you live in the UK, a Western country. Do you think that having children is going to change anything about that? Will your children not see you as the head of the family? And now, of course, there are a lot of people that get raised by the mainstream and influenced by that style of thinking, where women aren't feminine and men aren't masculine. But that doesn't have to mean that you cannot live your life the way that you want to live. Saying, oh, but my circumstances aren't great, so therefore I am not going to live my life right now and I need to change my circumstances first, is unironically a form of drawing the victim card, isn't it? Don't get me wrong. I am not saying don't change your circumstances when you can. Obviously, if it is easy for you to move to another country or do whatever you can to make your circumstances better, then that is a form of responsibility in itself, right? It's not drawing the victim card. But again, you have to understand that circumstances might change, but circumstances aren't necessarily getting better. You're just putting yourself under other circumstances with other problems that are probably equally as bad. And so you cannot constantly try to escape from the current circumstances that you have and expect that to make your life any easier. The only way to actually make your life easier, start living the life that you want to live, is to find your way through life regardless of whatever life tries to throw at you, regardless of circumstances. Think about it like this. If you would have been your own father, and someone came from the future and he told you, hey, your son is going to grow up in a generation where there's all this technology and he'll constantly isolate himself and all he'll do is procrastinate and play video games and he'll become lazy because of it and he'll fap to porn and his dopamine system will be numb and he will have no motivation to work towards his goals and he will become socially awkward because of it and then, all of that crap. What would you have done? In that situation, you could have made a similar choice as you do right now, right? Right now we have our reasons to think, oh, but my children will not be raised in perfect circumstances. Well, if you would have been your father, those would have been pretty severe circumstances, right? You could have made the choice of, well, I don't want that to happen to my son. Sounds horrible, right? I'm not going to have my children right here. But do you wish that your father did not have you? Do you regret existing? Do you regret growing up in the country that you grew up in? A Western country? The UK? Or are you quite happy that your father had you anyway and that you, despite your circumstances, learned from whatever circumstances were thrown at you and became better because of it and just found your way through life and started living your life anyway? Because that's how life really works. Again, don't take this the wrong way. I am not saying do not try to make things better. Absolutely, try to make things better. But you have to understand that things often don't actually get better by moving to another country or moving to another time in history, even if such a thing would have been possible. What really makes things better is just taking responsibility and finding your own way through life regardless of circumstances.